Justified City Primeval is the worst kind of bait and switch, and I am absolutely sick to death of this. Stick around and we can talk about why. Just take a second and think back to what made you love the original Justified series. It was Raylan, right? Regardless of how great everything else was in the show, it all revolved around Raylan Givens. Mostly it was Raylan's relationship with Kentucky. The minute he got transferred out of Miami after shooting Tommy Bucks, he was bitching about having to go home to Kentucky. Why? Because he thought of himself as being better than there, and anyone that grew up in a small town and moved away knows this feeling. Raylan both hated and loved going back to Harlan, and it was this tug of war that made all those interactions with the locals so great. You also had Raylan's relationships in the marshal's office and courthouse. Yeah, Raylan was great at what he did, but he was a fairly shitty marshal. He constantly broke the rules, broke the law, tested the patience of his chief, and basically made life difficult for the rest of the marshals by being a self-involved dick. But this is why we liked him. I mean, he wasn't arresting us and we didn't have to work with him. Except for the punk of the week type bad guys he'd deal with, every last one of the criminals on the show were three-dimensional. You obviously have Boyd Crowder as one of the greatest characters in TV history, but don't forget Mags Bennett from season 2. Just such a tremendously deep character. Even his own father, Arlo, was more than just some two-bit criminal. Then you have Quarles and Limehouse, Wynn Duffy, Picker and Nikki Augustine from Detroit. Even in the final season, you had Avery Markham and his various henchmen that were more than just some generic bad guys. Yeah, I'll give you that Daryl Crow Jr. from season 5, played by Michael Rappaport, was fairly awful, but I don't think that was a problem with the character, more so just the shitty actor who played him. One way or another, though, it was all about what a badass Raylan was. I've never done a full body count for him for the show, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot. Pointing out that Raylan was angry and violent was how they ended the damn pilot.
Guess I just never thought of myself as an angry man.
Raylan. Well, you do a good job of hiding it, and I suppose most folks don't see it, but honestly, you're the angriest man I have ever known.
So when FX threw out this teaser, notice what they're selling here. Right, it's all Raylan. Why? Well, you fucking know why. Because of everything I said earlier. Raylan is justified. So what have we actually gotten with City Primeval? Well, Raylan has no relationship at all with Detroit, so that's gone from the original series. Maybe if they had somehow connected this story to the Detroit angle from the original with Theo Tonin, but nah. Raylan has no relationship at all with the chief marshal in Detroit or the marshal's office there. So none of that great banter that we had gotten between him and Art Mullen or Tim and Rachel. He interacts with the local Detroit police, but just barely. We've gotten to know almost nothing about any of them, so there's no connection to any of that for Raylan either. And compared to several of the Detroit police, Raylan looks like the damn Boy Scout here. Well, what about the criminals? Sure, Clement Mansell is being made out to be the super bad guy, but through 5 episodes, that's all he is. Just bad. There's never any why given. And even though he's killed a bunch of people, I'm not sure I'd rank him in the top 10 most interesting bad guys in the franchise going back to the original series. The only halfway interesting criminal thus far is Sweetie, played by Vondi Curtis Hall, but he's completely overshadowed by Mansell prancing around in his underwear nonstop. And remember Raylan the badass from the original series? Yeah, he's gone. He's been replaced with a neutered version that has so far fired his weapon once at a tire 5 minutes into the season. Since then, nada. And in case you're thinking, but baby, maybe he's different because he's a father and a little older. Yeah, I'd buy that if that's what they had said in the actual show. The problem is, they haven't. And in fact, while being interviewed, Timothy Oliphant was quoted as saying, "We're not on a show that cheerleads for law enforcement." Well, that's interesting because the original series sure as shit did. Raylan or Art or any of the other marshals that stepped over the line were never held responsible for their actions. Hell, the entire storyline of Ava being threatened with going back to prison, even though they all knew she hadn't actually stabbed the prison guard and had already had the other charges dropped for killing that pimp, was wildly over the line. Nope, this is entirely a desire to neuter Raylan with 2023 eyes. It's why the defense attorney called him a racist in open court.
So, you were going to put a black man in the trunk of your car.
Keep in mind, of all the faults Raylan had in the original series, racism sure as shit wasn't one of them, and was constantly poking at Boyd for his past. So to have them suggest that with very little pushback from Raylan was uncalled for, but it was a clear indication of where we'd be going.
Damn, you brought the white boy here. When I caught you whining and dining mayonnaise sandwich at our restaurant, you do recall that the U.S. Marshals used to catch runaway slaves, put them back into bondage.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Speaking of the defense attorney Carolyn Wilder, someone please explain this to me. The lineup of gorgeous women Raylan had slept with in the original series was pretty legendary. This doesn't even account for others that threw themselves at him and he just smirked and went about his day. And what do all these women have in common? No, it's not that they're white, you damn racist. It's that they're smoking hot. They're all uniquely charismatic and clearly into Raylan in one way or another. Raylan could have easily been hooked up with some equally hot and cool black woman in the original, and it would have made perfect sense. The problem in City Primeval is that Wilder is literally none of those things. She's clearly not hot, not charismatic, and has been openly hostile to Raylan. And not in some playing hard to get sort of way, more like in a racist bitch sort of way. So to have him end up sleeping with her is wildly out of character for the Raylan we knew. Again, this is all 2023 messaging taking the lead here. What City Primeval actually is an urban crime drama with a mostly black cast and with that aesthetic being the driving force. And just to be clear, that's perfectly fine.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
The issue is that's not what Justified was. So to crassly slap that name on it and stick Raylan in there is textbook bait and switch. FX could have easily sold this show without his inclusion, and without attempting to tie it to a show it has literally no connection to. All that it had to say was that they were producing a new show based on an Elmore Leonard novel, the man that had given you the story behind Justified, and sell the show based on what it was. Instead, they attempted to shoehorn in a character that wasn't even in the original novel, just so they could bait fans of Justified to watch. Instead of Justified, we got Empire set in Detroit, with guest appearances by a guy that kinda acts like Raylan from Justified. It reminds me of the way shows in the 70s and 80s would have an actor guest star on another of the network shows as the character they played on their own show just to boost ratings. It's that obvious. And look, don't get me wrong, I like Tim Oliphant, but he's an executive producer on this show and he can't escape blame here. Just like Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill before him, he's allowed his iconic character to be completely neutered and altered into something that doesn't remotely resemble the character we all loved. It's a sad truth that fans are much better gatekeepers for these franchises than anyone involved in making them. I had high hopes that City Primeval could buck the trend and produce a worthy successor to the original series. Boy, I was wrong. This is terrible. And the worst part is, the show itself would just be typical forgettable content in 2023 had they not tried to stick the Justified label on it and shoehorn in Raylan. You could watch it, enjoy parts, laugh at others, and go on to the next thing. But since they decided to call it Justified and made Raylan an accomplice here, they deserve all the harsh criticism they're gonna get. And boy, I hope they're gonna get a lot. Fact is, City Primeval is completely unjustified. Until next time, thanks for watching.